Hi everybody. So last video, at least for now, on the Slab Boys and the Scottish set text. This one, just going to have a look through the actual exam paper and give you an idea of, I suppose, like the idea behind the paper, what it is we're looking for, which I think maybe helps students to figure out the best approach that's going to suit them. So the paper's basically in two parts. And in part one, there are 10 marks available. And in this bit here, it's very, very similar to a close reading, but instead of it being on a non-fiction unseen text newspaper article that comes up in the close reading papers, this is based on a bit of literature, but one that you've been taught. So it's not really a proper textual analysis. It sits in a kind of funny grey area. Best advice here, read the questions very carefully, do what you're told, same as the close reading, and answer them using the same kind of structures, where you're being asked to analyse things or to comment on things, it's pairs of bullet points, quote and explanation, no marks for the quotations, etc, etc, etc. All pretty normal. So here are some examples of, this is actually the questions from the 2019 paper. So these are all asking you to analyse things. It's higher. We're less concerned about getting you to understand the text that you've been taught. The main focus is getting you to analyse key aspects of it. So, referring to at least two examples, analyse how the writer's use of both stage direction and dialogue conveys the Slab Boys manipulate. That's quite a complex question. You need to really break it down. So you're saying, right, I need at least two examples. It says both stage direction and dialogue. So, right, we're going to have one that's going to be an example of stage direction and one that's going to be an example of dialogue. And it needs to show each time this way that Phil and Spanky are manipulating people. So I need an example of something Phil and or Spanky say to manipulate somebody. I need an example of something that they're doing in stage direction to manipulate somebody. But you also need to be aware that it's for 4 marks. And obviously the number of marks you get is dependent on the quality of the answers. Some people might get 2 marks for each of those 2 things and get the 4 that way. Some people might need to offer 4 examples. That might be 2 of stage direction and 2 of dialogue. It could be 1 of stage direction and 3 of dialogue, or vice versa. The question doesn't specify that, it just says both. But a really good example, that one of having to really think about the question, be dead careful and really quite meticulous in how you lay out the answer to make it very, very clear. And a lot of the questions work that way, as we'll see as we go further through the year as well. The bit I think people really worry about, though, is the 10-mark question. It's the second part of it. The thing is, though, think about this as an opportunity to show how much you understand about the text. When this paper was first being developed, and because I was teaching then, all the talk at this point was that this was a mini essay, that we were going to expect everyone to sit down and write this little mini essay that would work in a similar kind of way as a critical essay. And although I'm not asking you to do that, I'm getting you to do it as this kind of bullet pointed template. I still think it's helpful to maybe think about it along the same lines as the way you think about critical essays. The job is very, very similar. You're going to be talking about maybe it's a theme that you've been asked about. You have to explain it at the start, kind of how you do an introduction in a critical essay. And then you have to show me various examples of it coming up in the text and be able to explain why that's, why it's relevant, how that's the case. Some of them will come from the extract you'll have in the paper. Some of them are going to have to come from elsewhere, but again, in principle, not a million miles off how the critical essay works, but you don't have to write it as an essay, because I think that makes life harder than it has to be. So again, here are some examples of the kind of things that come up. You're likely to be asked something about either theme or character relationships. Are probably the most likely things, but you can see here, theme, self-deception, deception, attitudes to authority, opportunity, role of women, use of humour, but the use of humour is about developing character, so there is scope to be asked character-focused questions as well, but broadly speaking, in the past we've been looking at thematic concerns, hence why it's so important to have good notes on a good range of themes, and for each one have maybe 4 or 5 examples from throughout the play. So that even if one of your examples is in the extract, you'll still have 3 or 4 other bits of the play you can talk about, and that's really, really important. The thing that about it, what I'm going to show you in a wee second, is the way I would lay out the answer, but the thing to remember here is that for 8 of the 10 marks, this is how the marking works. You get 0 marks for referring to a bit of the extract, a bit of the rest of the play, or quoting a bit of the extract. If you give us a quotation or a reference and then give us a kind of fairly simple, straightforward but correct comment, you'll get 1 mark. But obviously, if you wanted full marks, and this is 8 of the 10 available are done this way, it would mean you would need 8 references to parts of the play. But the other thing is that you could do is, if you make your answers just a bit more sophisticated, a bit more complex, and I'm not going to go into that in this video, but we'll talk about that in class, about what that maybe looks like. In that case, you're likely to start picking up 2 marks sometimes. And when you start doing that, getting near enough, full marks for this paper kind of becomes quite manageable, and something that people, if you put the work in, are perfectly capable of achieving. So this is how I would be answering this paper, not a mini essay, because as I say, I think that makes your life harder than it has to be. Use this template. It's 2 stages. There's another slide to come with the other stage of it, but this is in your notebooks and everything. Remember, we've used it before. So the first couple of bullet points, if you've been asked about, the theme of opportunity was one of the ones that came up, give me a couple of bullet points, not full of quotes and all that kind of stuff, but where you just tell me in fairly kind of broad terms how this particular theme comes up in the play and what the kind of your basic understanding of it is. This is like the introduction. This is like the instruction in the critical essay, where you tell us how you're going to answer the question. Give us an overview of that particular theme or that particular relationship or whatever it is that comes up. And again, we'll look at examples of this in class. And I think you might even already have one in your notebook. Then try and give us at least 1, preferably 2, references or quotes from the extract with comments on how they are relevant to or help us to understand the theme or the thing that you've been asked about. And remember, so where it says quote comment there, you could either get 2, 1 or 0 marks in there. If all you put's a reference or a quote, you get 0. If you put a reference or a quote and a terrible answer that's wrong, you get 0. But if you put a reference or a quote and a wee basic answer, you get 1 mark. If you put a reference or a quote and a more developed, detailed answer, then you could get 2. Moving on from there, we're looking at the rest of the play. You want to reference other parts, and again, it's 2, 1 or 0. You don't have to quote. We're not looking for direct quotations, it's not the essay, but you need clear references, hence why you need to have a good grasp of the plot and the characters. And again, you're just giving us, at specific parts of the play, tell me what's going on so we know what the reference is, a specific bit, tell me which characters are there and what the conversation is at that point, what's the event that's going on, and then tell me how it's relevant. And if you stick to this kind of structure, then what you can do over the coming months is focus more on the quality of the answers. It's one of these areas where having a structure, a template, leads to better answers, because what it does is it lets you focus on the argument you're making. It lets you focus on the quality of your analysis and not worry so much all the time about how you're putting everything together. Let this put it together for you. You concentrate on the quality of what you're telling us, because again, that's where your marks are. Okay, so obviously we'll go over plenty of this in class. Any questions, you can let me know, but hopefully these few videos have been useful for you, just to kind of cover the key stuff that's going to be important as part of the Slab Boys for the Scottish set text paper. Thanks.